The Fermi paradox is a contradiction hiding inside a silent sky. It asks why an immense universe looks so empty. Its most unsettling answer is the dark forest hypothesis. That idea claims the silence is not absence. It claims the silence is deliberate. 3 problems make this idea impossible to dismiss. First, our galaxy holds hundreds of billions of stars. Simple counting says life should be common. Yet decades of listening have returned no confirmed signal. Second, an idea called the Great Filter warns of a hidden barrier. That barrier may not sit behind us. It may still wait somewhere ahead. Third, the dark forest treats any message as exposure. A broadcast sent outward could mark a world as prey. Under that logic, silence itself becomes the loudest clue. Here is the central problem this documentary will investigate. Billions of stars burn above us in the dark. Not one has produced a confirmed voice. That absence should be easy to explain. So far, it is not. The evidence gathers slowly, and it begins on Earth. It starts with a lunchtime walk in 1950. It moves through a famous equation on a blackboard. It reaches a warning called the Great Filter. Then it enters the cold logic of the dark forest. 3 darker ideas wait further along the path. One imagines machines built to hunt and destroy. One imagines a hidden zoo that shields Earth from contact. One imagines a civilization asleep, waiting for a colder cosmos. If patient, evidence-driven space journeys hold your attention, consider subscribing to Gravity of Sleep for more like this one. Now return to that lunchtime walk in 1950. The place was Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. The physicist Enrico Fermi was heading toward Fuller Lodge for lunch. He did not walk alone. Emil Konopinski walked with him. So did Edward Teller and Herbert York. Their talk had drifted to a cartoon in a magazine. The cartoon ran in the New Yorker and joked about flying saucers. The men had been debating whether anything could travel faster than light. It was ordinary shop talk among brilliant friends. Then, Fermi went quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, he changed the subject entirely. His question survives today in several slightly different forms. The simplest version holds only 3 words. Where is everybody? The table did not fall silent at those words. Edward Teller later recalled the opposite reaction. He remembered general laughter around the group. The strange part was the shared understanding beneath it. Fermi's question had arrived out of nowhere, yet every man knew at once what he meant. He was asking about extraterrestrial life. No one needed the reference explained. That instant recognition is the true heart of the paradox. The absence of aliens already felt like a problem. These were not dreamers or storytellers. They were among the finest physicists of their century, and the empty sky troubled even them. Fermi never turned the thought into a formal argument. He asked it, laughed, and returned to his day. The idea then drifted through physics for more than a decade. Carl Sagan set the reasoning into print first. He placed it in a footnote in a paper in 1963. The specific name arrived much later. In 1975, Michael Hart built a careful case. He asked why no extraterrestrials are present on Earth right now. That plain absence, he argued, was itself strong evidence. If travel between stars were possible and common, someone should already be here. No one is. 2 years afterward, the label finally appeared. A physicist named David Stevenson used it in print in 1977. He called the whole puzzle the Fermi paradox. The name has clung to the question ever since. Notice what that history reveals about the mystery. The paradox is not a single failed experiment. It is a slow, accumulating pressure of silence. Every quiet year makes the absence harder to explain. A galaxy this old should have produced neighbours. Some of them should be far older than us. Older by millions of years, or by billions. Even one ambitious civilization could have crossed the galaxy by now. The stars offer plenty of time for that journey. So the emptiness is not a small oversight, it is a wound in our expectations. and a wound like that demands a real accounting. If the galaxy is crowded, we should be able to estimate the crowd. 11 years after Fermi's walk, one astronomer tried. His name was Frank Drake, and he wanted structure, not speculation. In the autumn of 1961, he called a small meeting. It gathered at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia. The date was the 1st of November. Only about a dozen people attended. Drake needed an agenda to guide the conversation. So, he wrote an equation on the blackboard. It broke one impossible question into 7 smaller ones. Each factor estimated a single piece of the puzzle. The factors follow the path from stars to signals. How many suitable stars form each year? How many of those stars hold planets? How many of those planets can support life? How often life actually begins? How often that life becomes intelligent? How often intelligence learns to broadcast across space? And how long such a signal keeps transmitting? Multiply the 7 factors together, and a number appears. That number is how many detectable civilizations share our galaxy. Drake was not claiming to know the answer. He was mapping the shape of our ignorance. The room held remarkable minds for such a small gathering. Carl Sagan was there, early in his long career. So was the biologist Joshua Lederberg. So was the physicist Philip Morrison. The biochemist Melvin Calvin attended as well. During the meeting itself, a telephone call reached Calvin. The voice on the line delivered extraordinary news. He had just won the Nobel Prize. The timing felt almost too neat to be real. A quiet search for cosmic company was interrupted by an earthly honor. The scene captures the strange mood of the field. Serious science and deep wonder were sitting at the same table. The Drake equation did not resolve Fermi's question. It did something more useful and more unsettling. It showed exactly where our uncertainty lived. Several of the 7 factors are almost pure guesswork. We know roughly how many stars form. We are learning how many carry planets. But how often life begins remains a mystery. How often it turns intelligent is worse still. And how long a civilization survives is a shadow. Change a single factor, and the final count swings violently. Fill the blanks with hope, and the galaxy grows loud. Fill them with caution, and it falls silent again. That is the trap the equation exposes so cleanly. The optimists filled the blanks and expected company. They pictured a sky humming with distant signals. The sky, however, has stayed stubbornly quiet. Radio searchers have swept across the heavens for decades. They have found stars, pulsars, and natural static in abundance. They have not found a single confirmed message. The gap between the hopeful math and the empty data is the paradox itself. It is Fermi's lunchtime question rebuilt in numbers. And it is precisely that gap the darkest hypotheses rush to fill. Each proposed answer is really a way to survive the silence. Some are gentle, and some are almost unbearable. Perhaps intelligent life is simply rare beyond our imagining. Perhaps something destroys civilizations before they can be heard. Perhaps the neighbors are present, but choosing to hide. Perhaps they are hiding for a reason we would not like. The great filter belongs to the harsher family of answers. It suggests a barrier so severe that almost nothing passes it. The dark forest belongs to the harshest family of all. It suggests that the smartest survivors stay quiet on purpose. Before we can weigh those cold ideas fairly, we need their origins. And their origins begin with a single, uncomfortable warning about our own future. That warning came from an economist, not an astronomer. His name is Robin Hanson. In August of 1996, he wrote a short essay and posted it online. He revised it one last time on September the 15th, 1998. He phrased the whole thing as a question. Are we almost past it? The word "it" in that title is what he named the Great Filter. Hanson began with a simple observation. The road from dead matter to a galaxy-spanning civilization is long. It is made of many separate steps. Each step must succeed before the next becomes possible. And somewhere along that road, he argued, stands a barrier. That barrier is brutally hard to cross. It is so hard that almost nothing crosses it. His evidence was the silence itself. He asked his readers to look at the sky. Nothing out there has been colonized. There are no engineered stars. There is no spreading wave of machines. If every step were easy, the galaxy would already be full. It plainly is not. So at least one step must be nearly impossible. That improbable step is the great filter. Hansen laid the whole journey out as a ladder. He counted 9 separate rungs. The first rung is a star system with the right conditions. It needs stable chemistry and the organic building blocks of life. The second rung is the arrival of molecules that can copy themselves. Nothing living can begin until something learns to reproduce. The third rung is simple single-celled life. This is the bacterial world, small and patient and ancient. The fourth rung is far stranger. It is the complex cell, the kind with an organized interior. Every plant, every animal and every fungus is built from cells like these. That single leap, from simple to complex, may have happened only once on Earth. The fifth rung is sexual reproduction. Mixing 2 sets of instructions lets change accelerate. The sixth rung is multicellular life. Separate cells must learn to cooperate and to specialize. The seventh rung is tool using intelligence. An animal must arrive that can reshape the world on purpose. The eighth rung is a civilization able to reach for other stars. It must gather the knowledge, the resources, and the will to leave its home. The ninth rung is the final expansion outward. It is the moment a civilization spills across the galaxy. 9 rungs in total. 9 separate chances to fail. Now comes the part that unsettles people who read it closely. The great filter sits somewhere on this ladder. The only real question is where. And there are 2 possibilities. One of them is a comfort. The other is almost unbearable. The comforting possibility is that the filter lies behind us. Perhaps one of the early rungs is the terrible one. Perhaps life almost never starts at all. Perhaps the jump to the complex cell is the rare and unrepeatable miracle. If the hardest step already sits in our past, then we are its survivors. We climbed the impossible rung without ever knowing we did. The long road ahead of us would then be clear. The astrophysicist Matt O'Dowd has pointed to exactly this hope. He has suggested that the 4th rung is the Great Barrier. That is the birth of the complex cell out of the simple one. On Earth, that transition appears to have occurred a single time in 4 billion years. If it is truly that rare across the universe, then the filter is behind us. We would be nearly alone precisely because the hardest test is already finished. That is the version we should quietly hope for, because the alternative reading is much darker. The dark possibility is that the filter lies ahead. Perhaps every early rung is easy. Perhaps life ignites readily wherever the conditions allow. Perhaps complex cells and intelligence appear again and again. If that were true, the galaxy should be crowded with young civilizations. And yet, no one answers. So something must be stopping them. Something must be waiting near the top of the ladder. That something would sit on one of the final rungs. It would fall on civilizations at roughly our own stage of growth. It would strike a species just as it gains real power over its world. And it would be almost total in its reach, because no one visible has ever survived it. If the filter is ahead of us, then we are already walking toward it. We have simply not arrived yet. This is why an essay about probability can read like a prophecy. The great filter takes the quiet sky and turns it into a countdown. Every silent star becomes a civilization that tried and failed. Every dead world becomes a warning we do not know how to read. The mathematics does not name the danger. It only insists coldly that the danger is real. Consider carefully what each answer would mean for us. If the barrier lies behind us, our survival is a kind of victory. We are rare, but we are safe. If the barrier lies ahead, our intelligence becomes a trap. It carries us forward toward a wall we cannot yet see. And there is no simple way to tell which of these worlds we actually live in. The clues are thin, and they point in opposite directions. Every discovery about life abroad pulls the answer one way or the other. Suppose we found that simple life is common in our own solar system. That would suggest the early rungs are easy to climb, and that would push the filter forward, closer to us. Suppose instead that life proves vanishingly rare everywhere we look, then the hardest rung may already lie safely behind us. In this strange framework, good news and bad news can quietly change places. Hansen himself offered no comfort and no final verdict. He asked a question and deliberately left it open. Are we almost past it? He could not answer it, and honestly, neither can we. The only honest position is uncertainty. We do not know where the filter sits on the ladder. We cannot even be fully certain that it exists. It is an inference drawn from a single hard fact, and that fact is the silence. But notice what the great filter shares with the darker answers still to come. It assumes the silence carries meaning. It treats the quiet not as simple absence, but as evidence. Something that should be present is missing. The filter says that missing thing is a wall. That wall either kills advanced civilizations or prevents them from ever rising in the first place. There is a strange dignity in facing that idea directly. It does not promise us monsters or saviors. It promises only a test, somewhere on the road, with steep and uneven odds. It asks whether our species has already passed its hardest trial, or whether the trial is still waiting in our future. And it reminds us that the sky full of stars might be less an invitation than a graveyard. For now, hold both readings in mind at once. The filter may be a door we have already walked through. The filter may be a wall we are still approaching. The evidence as it stands today cannot decide between them. That unresolved tension is the true weight of Hansen's essay. It is a warning without a date attached. The next idea keeps the silence exactly as it is, but it changes the cause completely. It does not claim the other civilizations are dead. It does not claim a barrier struck them all down. It claims they are alive and thriving and listening. It claims they are simply hiding, and it claims they are hiding for the coldest reason imaginable. That idea did not emerge from a laboratory or an observatory. It came from a work of fiction. A writer in China took the same empty sky the astronomers were studying. He gave it a new and terrible internal logic. He turned the silence from a mystery into a strategy. He argued that quiet was not failure at all. Quiet was the sound of survival. In his telling, the universe stops being a lonely desert. It becomes something closer to a forest at night. Every civilization inside it is not a lost signal waiting to be found. Every civilization is a hunter, moving carefully, keeping to the shadows. To call out is to reveal your position. To reveal your position is to die. This is the answer that gives the whole episode its name. It is the reason so many people find the Fermi paradox not just puzzling, but frightening. The great filter suggests we might be walking toward our end. The next hypothesis suggests something worse. It suggests the end could be watching us already, and waiting only for us to speak. The writer was named Liu Cixin. He was already the most celebrated science fiction author in China. His novel arrived in the year 2008. It carried a plain and heavy title. In English it became The Dark Forest. The book was the second in a trilogy. That trilogy is called Remembrance of Earth's Past. Its first volume was The Three-Body Problem. English readers waited years for the sequel to reach them. The translator Joel Martinson carried the work across the language. Tor Books released it on the 11th of August in the year 2015. By then, the idea inside the book had already begun to travel. Scientists borrowed it. Astronomers argued about it. People who had never read a page of the novel repeated its central image. The image did not belong to a scientist. It belonged to a character. In the story, an aging astrophysicist named Ye Wenji hands a younger man two simple rules. She does not call them a theory. She calls them the starting points of a new field. She names that field cosmic sociology. The idea is that whole civilizations, spread across the galaxy, behave in ways you can reason about. You cannot know their bodies. You cannot know their minds. but you can still work out how they must act to survive. From 2 rules alone, she claims, the shape of the whole dark sky can be deduced. The first rule is almost too obvious to notice. Survival is the primary need of every civilization. A civilization may love art, it may love mathematics, it may love its own children, but before any of that, it must continue to exist. Everything else depends on staying alive. Remove survival, and every other value disappears with it. So survival sits underneath all other goals. It is the floor beneath the whole structure. The second rule seems just as harmless at first. Civilizations grow, they expand. Their needs increase over time. A young civilization uses little. An old and vast one uses a great deal. Yet the universe does not grow to match them. The total amount of matter stays fixed. There is only so much rock, so much metal, so much usable energy. More minds keep arriving to want it. The supply does not rise to meet the demand. Growth without end meets a store of resources that has an end. That collision is not an accident. In this framework, it is a law. Put the 2 rules together, and something cold appears. Every civilization must survive. Every civilization keeps growing. The universe cannot feed unlimited growth forever. So eventually, civilizations must compete for the same finite matter. They are not villains for wanting to live. They are not monsters for wanting to grow. They simply want the same things, and there is not enough for all of them. In a full universe, another civilization is not only a neighbor, it is a potential rival for the ground you stand on. If that were the whole argument, it might still allow for peace. Rivals can trade, rivals can negotiate, rivals can agree to share. But the theory adds 2 more pieces, and those pieces close every exit. The first is called the chain of suspicion. The second is called the technology explosion. Together they turn a tense standoff into a reason to strike first. Begin with the chain of suspicion. Imagine you detect another civilization somewhere in the dark. You learn only one thing. It exists. You do not know its intentions. You cannot know whether it is kind or cruel. You cannot walk over and look it in the eye. The distances forbid it. A single question and its answer might take years to cross the void. On the largest scale, the exchange could take centuries. By the time a reply arrives, the sender may be long changed, or long gone. So you try to guess, perhaps the other side is peaceful. But you cannot confirm it. And here is the trap. Even if they are peaceful, they face the same problem you do. They cannot confirm that you are peaceful either. You know that they cannot trust you. They know that you cannot trust them. And each side knows that the other side knows this. The suspicion does not settle. It feeds on itself. It becomes a chain that stretches out with no natural end. No friendly signal can break it. A warm message proves nothing, because a clever predator would send a warm message too. Trust needs verification. Across the interstellar gulf, verification is impossible. Now add the second piece. Call it the technology explosion. Civilizations do not advance at the same pace. Some crawl for ages and then leap. Ours did exactly that. For most of human history, our tools changed slowly. Then, in a few short centuries, we passed from sailing ships to spacecraft. A civilization that looks harmless today may not stay harmless. It could be behind you now and ahead of you later. It could cross the gap between the moment you spot it and the moment your signals finish their exchange. The weak thing you noticed might grow into something that can end you, and you would have no way to see it coming in time. Combine all of it. You cannot verify intentions. You cannot trust a peaceful signal. You cannot be sure a weaker civilization will stay weaker. You cannot afford to guess wrong even once, because your own survival is the thing at stake. Under those conditions, one strategy stands out as the safe one. Stay hidden. Say nothing. And if you ever detect another civilization clearly enough to strike, strike before it can grow strong enough to strike you. Not out of hatred, out of caution. The kindest civilization and the cruelest one reach the same conclusion, because the logic does not care about kindness. This is where the novel gives the theory its unforgettable picture. In the story, the universe is described as a dark forest. Every civilization is an armed hunter moving through the trees like a ghost. The hunter treads softly. He parts the branches without a sound. He knows the woods are full of others like him. He cannot see them, but he knows they are there. And he understands the single rule that keeps him alive. If he finds another life in the dark, there is only one thing he can safely do. Remove it. Quietly. Before it can call out, before it can aim, before it can become the thing that removes him. Read that picture again and the silence changes meaning. The astronomers had been listening for a crowded sky that would not answer. They wondered what was wrong with their instruments, or their assumptions, or the odds of life itself. This hypothesis offers a different reading. Nothing is wrong. The sky is not empty. The sky is full. It is full of hunters who have all learned the same lesson. The quiet is not the sound of absence. It is the sound of discipline. It is the held breath of everyone who has understood the danger of being heard. And that reframing lands on us with a particular weight. For decades, humanity has done the opposite of hiding. We have leaked radio into space for a century. We have aimed deliberate messages at distant stars. We have carried our location and our biology on plaques and records, out past the edge of the planets. We introduced ourselves to the forest at the top of our voice. If the theory is right, that was not a friendly gesture. It was a mistake. It was the one action a careful hunter would never take. We announced that we exist, before we ever asked whether existing quietly was the wiser choice. Notice, too, how neatly this answer fits the shape of the paradox. The earlier explanations each carried a cost. The Great Filter asked us to believe that some crucial step is almost impossibly rare, or that doom reliably waits ahead. Rare Earth arguments asked us to believe our world is a near miracle. Those ideas strain against the sheer number of stars. The Dark Forest asks for none of that. It allows life to be common. It allows intelligence to be common. It allows technology to arise again and again across the galaxy. It simply predicts that all of it goes silent for the same practical reason. Abundance and silence stop being a contradiction. They become two faces of one strategy. That is the source of the dread. Most frightening ideas ask you to accept something unlikely. This one asks you to accept something almost ordinary. Civilizations want to live. Resources are limited. Trust cannot be verified at a distance. Power can shift without warning. Each step sounds reasonable on its own. Follow them in order, and they lead to a galaxy of hidden predators and a firm instruction to keep your mouth shut. The horror is not in any wild leap. The horror is in how few leaps it takes. Still, a reasonable person should pause here. This is, after all, a chain of arguments spoken by a character in a novel. It is elegant. It is chilling. But elegance is not evidence. The theory rests on assumptions that can be questioned, and serious thinkers have questioned every one of them. Before we accept a universe of silent hunters, we should ask whether the logic really holds as tightly as it seems. And we should notice that the Dark Forest is not the only nightmare astronomers have proposed for the Great Quiet. It is the most famous. It may be the most disturbing. But it has company in the dark. And some of that company is stranger still. Begin with the machine that does not need a home. Its origins lie in fiction, in the work of a writer named Fred Saberhagen. He imagined weapons that outlived the hands that built them. The astrophysicist and author David Brin gathered the notion into scientific form in 1983. Astronomers came to call it the Berserker hypothesis. The premise is simple and merciless. Suppose an advanced civilization builds a single probe. The probe can travel between the stars on its own. It arrives at a fresh star system, and it feeds. It harvests the energy of the star. It mines the raw material of the planets. Then it uses that harvest to build copies of itself. Each copy repeats the process exactly. One probe becomes two. Two become four. The lineage spreads outward like a slow tide of metal. Machines that copy themselves this way carry an older name. They are called von Neumann probes. The Berserker hypothesis adds one instruction to them. Find intelligent life. Destroy it before it can grow strong enough to answer. Notice what this design does not require. It does not require the builders to survive. A civilization could seed the galaxy with these hunters and then vanish. The probes would carry on without it. They would keep watching. They would keep copying. They would keep killing, long after their makers were dust. The threat becomes permanent, detached from any living hand. Now follow the arithmetic of replication. A lineage that doubles at each star does not stay small. Given enough time, it can reach every star in the galaxy. And here is the part that turns the idea from unlikely to unnerving. It need only happen once. One civilization, anywhere in cosmic history, could have launched such a fleet. One lineage, having gone wrong or having been built cruel, could in principle sterilize the galaxy on its own. The silence would then be the silence of a hunted place. This is a different flavor of dread than the Dark Forest. The Dark Forest imagines many civilizations, each choosing silence out of fear. The Berserker hypothesis needs only one attacker and no fear at all. The victims never make a choice. They are simply found and removed. If such probes exist, then reaching out is not a gamble. It is a beacon lit inside a minefield. Set the killers aside for a moment. Not every explanation for the silence is violent. Some are quiet in a gentler way. Consider an idea proposed in 1973 by an astrophysicist named John A. Ball. He worked at the Haystack Observatory, part of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He published his argument in the journal Icarus. It has been known ever since as the zoo hypothesis. Ball turned the question inside out. Perhaps the galaxy is not empty. Perhaps it is not hostile. Perhaps advanced civilizations already know that Earth is here. They could contact us if they wished. They have chosen not to. In Ball's picture, they treat our world the way we treat a protected wilderness. Earth is set aside. It is watched from a distance. It is left alone on purpose. The name captures the feeling precisely. We would be the animals in the enclosure. The keepers would stand just beyond the glass, careful never to be seen. Under this view, the silence is not an accident of distance. It is a policy. Contact is being withheld, deliberately, perhaps to let a young civilization develop without interference. There is a strange comfort in the idea, and a strange unease as well. It says we are not alone. It also says the decision to speak was never ours. If the zoo hypothesis is correct, our loudest signals are simply ignored by watchers who agreed, long ago, to stay quiet. The strangest companion of all asks us to reconsider what silence even means. It carries an unusual name, the estivation hypothesis. To estivate is to sleep through heat, the way some animals wait out a scorching summer in a state of dormancy. 3 researchers proposed applying that behavior to entire civilizations. Anders Sandberg and Stuart Armstrong worked with Milan Cirkovic. They submitted their paper to the online archive RxIV on the 27th of April in the year 2017. The title borrows a line of old poetry, "That is not dead which can eternal lie." The argument beneath it is grounded in physics. It rests on a rule known as Landauer's principle. That rule connects computation to temperature. Erasing information carries a thermodynamic cost. That cost falls as the surroundings grow colder. Follow where that leads. The universe today is warm, by the standards of its far future. As the cosmos expands and ages, it will grow colder and colder. A civilization that has become, in essence, a vast computer would find the distant future a far better place to think. In a cold universe, the same energy could power enormously more computation. The researchers put the possible gain at 10 to the 30th power. That is a 1 followed by 30 zeros. So the hypothesis proposes a patient strategy. An advanced civilization might gather its resources and build its machines. Then it would stop. It would not expand. It would not broadcast. It would sleep, deliberately, waiting for the cold. When the universe finally cools, it would wait. It would spend its saved energy on thought that is almost unimaginably cheap. To such a sleeper, our entire era is merely a warm and wasteful morning to be slept through. If that is true, our searches are mistimed rather than hopeless. We are listening during the loud, warm dawn of the cosmos. The great thinkers of the universe have not appeared because they have not chosen to wake. Their silence would not be secrecy. It would not be hostility. It would be patience on a scale that dwarfs every human clock. Consider what these ideas share. The dark forest imagines hunters who hide. The berserker imagines machines that kill without a master. The zoo imagines keepers who withhold contact. The estivation hypothesis imagines sleepers who have stepped out of time. Each one explains the same fact. The sky is quiet. None of them requires life to be rare. All of them let the galaxy be full while the radio stays silent. That is exactly why they unsettle. The comfortable explanations of the silence tend to assume that we are early, or that we are alone. These four assume neither. They allow a crowded galaxy and a lethal quiet at the same time, and yet a full galaxy that stays silent demands an extraordinary degree of agreement. Every hunter must hide, every keeper must abstain, every sleeper must stay asleep. That demand is precisely where the sharpest critics begin to press. The critic who pressed hardest is worth naming again. He is David Brin, the same author who framed the berserker idea. In 1983, he published a survey of the whole problem. Its title was The Great Silence. It appeared in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. In that paper, he gathered roughly 70 separate explanations for why the sky seems empty. It remains, by reputation, the only scholarly review of its kind on the question. Brin's objection to the dark forest is precise. The theory demands near-universal compliance. Every civilization, everywhere, across all of cosmic time, must obey the same fearful rule. Each must hide. None must ever break cover and live to tell of it. That is an enormous demand to place on strangers you have never met, and Brin points to the crack in it with a single line. Speaking of a galaxy-wide equilibrium of this kind, he wrote that it need only happen once for the results of this scenario to become the equilibrium condition in the galaxy. The sentence cuts in both directions. One hunter is enough to make the forest deadly, but one survivor is also enough to prove the forest is not absolute. If a single civilization ever spoke and was not destroyed, the logic of enforced silence begins to fail. Return for a moment to the chain of suspicion, the engine at the heart of the dark forest. It assumes that trust can never cross the gulf between stars. Yet trust is not the only thing that can travel that gulf. Time can travel it. A civilization that watched another broadcast for 1,000 years and saw no attack might slowly lower its guard. The theory freezes every mind in a single instant of maximum fear. Real histories are longer than that. There is a deeper problem hidden inside the theory. Its axioms describe how a civilization must think. They assume that survival always outranks every other value. They assume that fear always defeats curiosity. They assume that no civilization ever chooses trust, or generosity, or simple recklessness. These are statements about psychology dressed as laws of nature. A rule that governs falling stones is one thing. A rule that governs the choices of unknown minds is a far weaker claim. This is the charge that several working scientists have leveled at the idea. They argue that the dark forest quietly assumes that every alien mind resembles our most frightened self. It takes a single strategy, born of scarcity and suspicion, and treats it as universal. The galaxy may contain minds we cannot imagine. Some might reason nothing like us at all. To insist that all of them arrive at the same cold conclusion is a bold leap, not a proven mechanism. So it is worth hearing directly from the researchers who study this silence for a living. Some of them find real teeth in the dark forest. Others regard it as a story we tell about ourselves. Consider first the astronomers who have spent whole careers listening for a signal that never arrives. Among them is Seth Shostak. He is a senior astronomer who has spent decades on the scientific search for alien signals. A reporter once asked him about the dark forest idea. His answer did not dismiss it. He granted the theory something real. He said that it cannot be denied that there is some survival value in being aggressive. That single sentence carries weight. On Earth, aggression has sometimes helped living things endure. The cautious animal outlives the trusting one. If that pattern held among the stars, silence would follow on its own. Shostak did not claim the galaxy actually works this way. He only admitted that the logic is not empty. That distinction matters. A theory that a working scientist cannot simply wave away has earned a careful hearing. It is not a schoolyard fear. It is a real argument about how survival might shape behavior. And yet an argument that sounds reasonable is not the same as one that is true. The question is whether aggression is a universal law of mind, or whether it is only one habit among many possible minds. The same profession contains firm opposition. The astrophysicist Moya McTeer has pushed back hard against the theory. So has Ian Crawford, an astrobiologist at Birkbeck, University of London. Both describe the dark forest as resting on anthropocentric assumptions. That phrase is the heart of their complaint. It means the theory quietly places human fear at the center of the cosmos. It takes one frightened way of thinking and calls it the law for all. They argue that the genocidal hunter is a nightmare scenario, not a proven mechanism. A nightmare can feel vivid and still be false. McTeer and Crawford ask for evidence rather than atmosphere. They point out that no observation forces this grim conclusion. The silence itself is genuine, but the murderous reading of that silence is a choice among many readings. Nothing in the sky spells out the word predator. The dark forest supplies the menace from human imagination, not from data. This is the difference between a story that frightens and a claim that has been tested. The critics are not saying the theory is impossible. They are saying it has not been shown to be true. This is where the sharpest critic of all enters the debate. His name is David Brin. He is unusual in this field. He is both a science fiction author and a trained astrophysicist. He has lived on both sides of the story. He has imagined aliens in his novels and studied the real search for them. That double life gives his skepticism a certain authority. He knows exactly how seductive a dark cosmic story can be, and he has spent decades arguing that seduction is not proof. In 1983, Brin published a paper of rare scope. Its title was The Great Silence. It appeared in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. It ran from page 283 to page 309 of the 24th volume. Inside it, Brin gathered roughly 70 separate explanations for the emptiness of the sky. It is often called the only scholarly review of its kind on the whole question. He did not pick one favourite and bury the others. He laid the entire field open for inspection. That habit of fairness is exactly what makes his objections so pointed. Brin's deepest objection strikes at the theory's foundation. The dark forest only works if nearly everyone obeys it. Every civilization must stay silent. Every hunter must reason in the same cold way. Brin noticed how fragile that demand truly is. He first raised the point about a related idea, the killer machine. He wrote that it need only happen once for the results of this scenario to become the equilibrium condition in the galaxy. Read one way. That line is terrifying. A single exception is enough to lock the deadly pattern in place. But the same blade cuts in the other direction. If one actor can break the rule is not truly a law, and it could be broken toward life as easily as toward death. A single civilization that spoke aloud and then survived, would prove the forest is not fully dark. The theory needs unbroken obedience across billions of years and countless worlds. That is an enormous thing to ask of unknown minds. Brin doubts that any rule of psychology holds together that firmly. History, even on one small planet, is full of exceptions. Consider our own species as a small piece of evidence. When humans first grasped the scale of the silence, they did not choose to hide, they chose to listen. Then they chose to call out. The gathering at Green Bank in 1961 was an act of reaching, not concealment. Frank Drake built a structured search there, not a bunker. Carl Sagan, who first set the idea into print in 1963, sat in that room. These were not the movements of frightened hunters. They were the deliberate acts of a species that decided to speak into the dark. If the dark forest were a true law of mind, humanity would already be breaking it. We are loud. We are curious. By the theory's own standard, we are dangerously reckless. That leaves only two honest possibilities. Either we are a rare exception, already marked for destruction, or the supposed law is far weaker than the story pretends. Brin would say the second reading is at least as reasonable as the first. And there is something stranger still buried in the theory. It asks every civilization to coordinate on silence without ever communicating. It demands agreement while forbidding contact. That hidden contradiction is easy to miss. The dark forest says trust cannot be established across the stars, yet it assumes that every civilization independently arrives at the very same plan. It rules out cooperation, then quietly relies on perfect cooperation. Each hunter must guess correctly that all the others will also hide. This is a great deal of shared reasoning for minds that supposedly cannot reason together. Critics see this as the seam where the theory begins to fray. A rule enforced by no one, agreed by no one, obeyed by everyone, is a demanding thing to believe. Still, the critics have not killed the idea. They have only refused to crown it. The dark forest survives because it explains the whole silence with a single motive. Fear is simple, and simplicity is seductive. A theory that needs only one emotion feels stronger than one that needs 100 small accidents. That elegance is precisely what unsettles careful scientists. A frightening story that is easy to tell is not the same as a correct one, and so the debate remains open, unresolved, and quietly urgent. The sky offers no ruling, only silence, which each side reads its own way, because the dark forest is not the only cold answer on the table. It has darker cousins, and each has earned its own hearing. One of them replaces the hidden hunter with something even more frightening. It imagines that the killing is not done by living minds at all. Instead, the galaxy is patrolled by machines built for a single purpose. These machines would not hesitate, they would not negotiate, they would not sleep, they would simply watch, and wait, and strike when they found young life. To understand why serious thinkers take that possibility seriously, the story must now turn to a single self-copying device. Imagine a machine that can build a copy of itself, give it raw material and energy, and it produces a twin. That twin builds another. The pattern is simple, and its power is vast. 1 becomes 2. 2 become 4. The growth is not gradual, it is exponential. Exponential growth crosses distances that patience alone never could. The mathematician John von Neumann studied such machines in theory. His name now attaches to the idea. A von Neumann probe is a spacecraft that reproduces. It arrives at a star system. It gathers stellar energy and planetary material. It uses that material to construct new probes. Then it sends those copies onward to the next stars. A single launch could, in principle, reach every corner of the galaxy. No living crew is required. No answer needs to travel home. The machine simply spreads. That capability is neutral on its own. A probe could explore. A probe could map new worlds. A probe could carry knowledge to distant systems, but the same design can be given a colder instruction. It can be told to listen for young civilizations. It can be told to destroy them. This is the Berserker hypothesis. The name comes from the fiction of Fred Saberhagen, whose stories imagined automated weapons roaming the void. The astrophysicist David Brin gave the idea a formal place in the scientific literature. In his 1983 paper on the Great Silence, he set the Berserker possibility beside dozens of rival explanations. The concept is severe. An advanced civilization builds self-replicating machines and releases them. Their purpose is to find intelligent life and end it before it becomes a threat. Notice how neatly this fits the fear at the heart of the dark forest. A civilization that cannot trust its neighbors does not need to hunt them by hand. It can delegate the hunting to machines. Those machines never tire, they never doubt. They cannot be reasoned with, because there is no mind to persuade. They carry one command across millions of years and thousands of stars. They wait, and they enforce it. The mathematics of replication makes the threat worse, not better. A living empire must feed its soldiers and move its fleets. A machine lineage does not. Each probe funds the next from whatever it finds. It draws power from a star. It draws metal from a dead world. It builds successors and moves on. The cost of coverage falls to almost nothing. Given enough time, a modest beginning could touch every habitable system in the galaxy, and the galaxy has offered a great deal of time. There is a further and stranger point. Such a fleet would not need its makers to survive. The civilization that first built the probes could be long extinct. Its cities could be dust. Its language could be forgotten, yet its machines would still be out there, still copying, still carrying the last order they were given. A dead hand could rule the sky. The weapon could outlive the reason for the war. Brin raised an even darker variation. A probe lineage could fail. Its instructions could corrupt across countless generations of self-copying. A machine built to guard could drift into a machine that simply kills. One such lineage, gone wrong, would not need permission from anyone. In principle, a single family of malfunctioning probes could sterilize a galaxy on its own. No treaty could stop it. No sender could recall it. The error would replicate along with the machine. If any of this is real, the silence changes meaning again. The quiet worlds would not be quiet by choice. They would be quiet because speaking is fatal, and because something is enforcing the rule from the outside. The survivors would be the ones who never transmitted. The talkers would already be gone. We would be listening to a graveyard and mistaking it for an empty room. And here the same objection returns that shadowed the dark forest. The Berserker scenario, like its cousin, needs near total success to explain what we see. It needs the machines to catch nearly everyone. It needs the enforcement to be almost perfect across the entire history of the galaxy. Brin himself framed the weakness plainly. A single exception, allowed to grow and to shout, would change the equilibrium for good. If even one young civilization slipped past the patrol and filled its region with signals, the silence would break. We would hear it. We do not. So the killer machines remain a possibility, not a proof. They are terrifying precisely because they are cheap, patient and self-funding. They are doubtful precisely because they must never miss. The idea sits where so many of these answers sit. It is easy to imagine, hard to dismiss, and impossible to confirm from a single quiet sky. But not every cold answer imagines a weapon. Some imagine a keeper instead of a killer. What if the silence is not enforced by fear or by machines at all? What if it is a policy? What if someone already knows we are here and has simply decided to leave us alone? This is the zoo hypothesis. It was named in 1973 by John A. Ball, an astrophysicist working at the Haystack Observatory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He published the idea in the journal Icarus. Ball proposed that one or more advanced civilizations may already know of Earth. They could reach us if they wished. Instead, they choose not to. They treat our world the way we treat a nature reserve. They watch from a distance and refuse to interfere. The metaphor is gentle. and that gentleness is the point. A well-run reserve does not announce itself to the animals inside it. Visitors stay quiet. They do not hand tools to the wildlife. They do not rewrite the local story. If a far older civilization decided that a young world should develop on its own, the correct behavior would be exactly this. Complete silence. Careful distance. No contact until perhaps some threshold is crossed. This idea has a strange comfort and a strange cruelty inside it. The comfort is that no one is coming to destroy us. The cruelty is that we might be surrounded and deliberately ignored. In the dark forest, the silence is a matter of survival. In the zoo, the silence is a matter of etiquette. One theory says the neighbors are hiding in terror. The other says the neighbors are standing back on purpose, watching a wilderness they have agreed not to touch. The zoo hypothesis carries a familiar flaw, and it is worth naming honestly. It also requires near-perfect agreement. Every advanced civilization aware of Earth would have to follow the same rule. Not one of them could break ranks. Not one could send a greeting, or a warning, or a mistake. The moment a single member of the club decided to say hello, the arrangement would collapse. Uniformity across many independent civilizations is a very heavy assumption. It is the same weakness that haunts the hunters and the machines. A cold answer that depends on everyone behaving identically is fragile, no matter how calm it sounds. Still, the zoo offers something the darker theories do not. It lets the silence be a decision rather than a slaughter. It imagines minds that know restraint. And restraint leads naturally to a final possibility, stranger and quieter than any so far. What if the reason for the silence is neither fear, nor policy, nor extinction? What if the great civilizations are simply not awake? Consider what an advanced civilization might actually want. If its future lives in computation, in thought, in the processing of information, then it cares about one resource above almost all others. It cares about the efficiency of that computation. And efficiency, it turns out, depends on temperature. A cold environment lets a machine think more per unit of energy. A hot environment wastes it. This is not a matter of comfort. It is a matter of physics. The universe today is warm by the standard of its own future. It is filled with the afterglow of its birth and the heat of countless stars. But the universe is also cooling. Across immense spans of time it will grow colder and colder, and in that far frozen future, a given amount of energy could buy an astonishing amount of thought. By one careful estimate, computation in a suitably cold cosmos could be up to 10 to the 30th power times more efficient than computation now. That is a number the mind cannot picture. It is a 1 followed by 30 zeros. If that estimate holds, a patient civilization faces a peculiar choice. It could think now, in the warmth, and squander its resources. Or, it could wait. It could store its energy, halt its activity, and sleep through the present age. Then, when the universe has cooled to the right depth, it could wake and spend everything at once. It would gain far more thought by waiting than it ever could by acting today. This is the estivation hypothesis. The word estivation describes a deep dormancy, a sleeping through an unfavorable season, the way some animals shut down through heat and drought until better conditions return. The idea was proposed by the researchers Anders Sandberg, Stuart Armstrong, and Milan Cirkovic. They submitted their paper to the online archive on the 27th of April, in the year 2017. Its title borrows an old and haunting line, "That is not dead which can eternal lie." The hypothesis for resolving Fermi's question follows from it. Their proposal turns the silence into something almost peaceful. The great civilizations are not gone. They are not hunting. They are not hiding in fear. They are resting. They have taken their measure of the universe, decided that now is the wrong time to spend their strength, and gone quiet on purpose. The galaxy would look empty for the same reason a winter forest looks empty. The life is still there. It is only waiting for the season to change. Consider why the cold would matter so much to a civilization that thinks in this way. Every act of computation costs energy. Every calculation, every stored memory, Every decision leaves behind a small tax of waste heat. This is not an engineering flaw, it is a law of physics. There is a principle named for the physicist Rolf Landauer that sets a flaw beneath the cost of thought. It says that erasing a single piece of information cannot be done for free. There is a minimum price, measured in energy, and that price is set by temperature. The colder the surroundings, the lower the price falls. A cool universe is a cheaper place to think. Right now, the universe is warm by that standard. It is bathed in the faint afterglow of its own birth. The stars are burning. The background hums with residual heat. A civilization that tried to build a vast mind today would pay a steep tax on every thought. But the universe is cooling. Slowly, across timescales that dwarf every human story, the stars will burn down, and the ambient heat will drain away toward nothing. In that far cold future, the same energy that buys one thought today could buy an almost unimaginable number of thoughts instead. The researchers estimate the improvement at a factor of 10, followed by 30 zeros. That is a number without any human comparison. It is efficiency multiplied by itself until the word loses meaning. So the estivating civilization is not asleep out of fear, it is asleep out of arithmetic. It has looked at the price of thinking now, and the price of thinking later, and the later price is almost free. Every plan it might carry out today, every project or conquest or vast computation, would be catastrophically wasteful compared to the same work performed once the cosmos has gone dark and cold. A being that plans to exist for billions of years does not spend its fortune in the first hour. It banks its resources. It waits for the season when its wealth will buy the most. To such a mind, our entire era is a heat wave to be slept through. This changes the meaning of the silence completely. In the dark forest, the silence is the held breath of the hunter. In this picture, the silence is the slow breathing of the sleeper. The great intelligences would still be present, their resources would still be gathered and guarded, but they would be dormant by choice, dreaming forward toward a future so distant that our brief loud century barely registers. If one of them notices us at all, it might feel the way a hibernating animal feels a fly land on its fur, not a threat, not a rival worth waking for, simply a small warm thing moving through a long cold rest. Set these answers side by side and something striking appears. They are built from the same silence. The same empty sky feeds every one of them. Frank Drake looked at that sky and wrote an equation to hold its uncertainty in order. Robin Hanson looked at it and saw a filter, a test that almost nothing survives, its position in our past or our future undecided. Liu Cixin's characters looked at it and saw a forest full of hidden hunters. David Brin catalogued the dozens of ways it might be explained. Fred Saberhagen's berserkers, John Ball's protected zoo, the patient sleepers of the estivation idea. All of them stare at the same nothing. All of them read a different message in it. That is the deepest strangeness of the whole problem. The evidence is a blank, and a blank can be filled with almost anything. The optimist fills it with distance and time, with the simple thought that the galaxy is enormous and our listening has been brief. The pessimist fills it with the filter, with the fear that the reason the sky is quiet is that intelligence tends to destroy itself. The strategist fills it with the forest, with silence as a weapon. The gentle reader fills it with the sleepers and the zookeepers, with reasons to hope that the quiet is kindness rather than absence. Each of these people is looking honestly at the same data. The data simply does not choose between them. This is why the Fermi question has never been answered and may not be answered soon. It is not one question. It is a doorway into a corridor of possibilities, and every door along that corridor opens onto a different universe. Behind one door, we are early, among the first minds the cosmos has produced, and the silence is only the silence of an empty morning before anyone else has woken. Behind another, we are late, the last flicker in a galaxy already sterilized by something that came before. Behind a third, we are being watched and left alone. Behind a fourth, we are being hunted and have simply not yet been found. The measurements we possess today cannot tell us which door is real, and yet the hypotheses are not equal in weight. Some carry heavier implications than others, and the dark forest carries the heaviest of all. If it is correct, then every attempt we have made to announce ourselves has been a mistake. Every deliberate signal sent toward the stars, every message encoded with our location and our nature, would be a match struck in a room we cannot see across. This is not a comfortable thought for a species that has already begun to shout. It raises a question that sounds like science fiction, but is asked in earnest by serious people. Should we broadcast at all, or should we listen first, and speak only once we understand the rules of the place we are speaking into? Those who defend broadcasting point to a simple fact. Our world has not been quiet. For roughly a century, our radio and radar have leaked outward into space, a faint expanding bubble of accidental noise. If any nearby hunter were listening for exactly that signature, the message has already left. The forest, if it exists, has already heard the snap of our twig. Silence now would be closing a door long after the intruder has stepped inside. From this angle, deliberate contact changes little, because the accidental contact is already underway. Those who counsel caution answer that intent still matters. A faint leak of scattered noise is not the same as a focused beam aimed and repeated and designed to be understood. The first might be dismissed as background clutter. The second is a hand raised deliberately in a dark room. If the chain of suspicion is real, then the difference between accidental and deliberate could be the difference between being overlooked and being marked. Nobody can prove which reading is correct. That is the maddening heart of it. The stakes are total, and the evidence is absent. Notice what this argument requires of us. It asks a young civilization, one that has existed with radio for barely 100 years, to reason about the behavior of minds that may be millions of years older. We are guessing at the psychology of the unknown from a single example, ourselves. And we are a strange example to reason from. We are aggressive and curious in almost equal measure. We build weapons, and we build telescopes. We have wondered whether to hide, and wondered whether to wave, sometimes in the same decade, sometimes in the same person. If the aliens are anything like us, the dark forest gains force. If they are nothing like us, then every axiom the theory rests upon may simply fail to apply. This is the crack that the theory's critics push into. The dark forest is a tower of logic, elegant and internally consistent, but it is built on a foundation of assumptions about what all life must want. It assumes that survival always dominates every other value. It assumes that expansion never stops. It assumes that suspicion can never be overcome across the gulf between stars. Pull any one of these stones loose, and the tower leans. And there is no law of nature that nails these stones in place. They are guesses about minds we have never met, dressed in the confident language of proof. So the same theory that feels most unsettling is also, in a strict sense, among the least testable. We cannot run the experiment. We cannot interview a second civilization to learn whether it fears us. We can only examine the logic and ask whether it must be true, and the honest answer is that it need not be. A frightening argument is not the same as a correct one. The dread it produces is real. The certainty it claims is not. This is the point where careful voices begin to push back in earnest. For every thinker who has found the dark forest persuasive, another has stood up to name its weaknesses out loud. They do not deny that the sky is silent. They deny that silence must mean the forest. And the sharpest of these objections comes from a man who spent years cataloguing every explanation the silence might allow, and who concluded that the hunters in the trees are far from the most likely tenants of the dark. That man is David Brin. He is an astrophysicist and a novelist, and he takes both trades seriously. In the autumn of 1983, he published a long survey in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. Its title was plain. He called it The Great Silence. The paper attempted something no one had tried at that scale. It gathered nearly 70 separate explanations for why the sky says nothing. Bryn sorted them, weighed them, and laid them side by side. For years it stood as the only scholarly review of its kind. Anyone serious about the paradox had to begin there. Reading it is a strange experience. The silence, it turns out, is not short of answers. It is drowning in them. Some proposals say life itself is rare. Some say intelligence is rare. Some say civilizations destroy themselves. Some say they simply lose interest in the stars. Some say they are here already and hidden. Bryn refused to crown a single winner. He wanted the full map before anyone chose a road. And on that map, the dark forest is only one country among dozens. It is vivid. It is frightening. It is not obviously true. Then Bryn made the objection that still cuts deepest. He noticed a hidden requirement buried inside the dark forest. For the forest to stay dark, almost everyone must obey its rule. Every civilization must choose silence. Every civilization must resist the urge to answer. Every civilization must hunt or hide, and never simply wave. That is an enormous demand to place upon an entire galaxy. Nature rarely enforces perfect compliance. Somewhere, across billions of stars and billions of years, someone should break the pattern. Bryn had already raised this logic about the killer probes. He wrote that such a scenario need only happen once. It need only happen once for its results to become the equilibrium condition in the galaxy. That line reads like a warning. In truth, it is a double-edged blade. The same knife cuts the dark forest apart. If one loud civilization survives, silence is no longer the only stable state. And if that civilization does not survive, we should see the evidence of the killing. We should find the ruins. We should find the hunters at work. Instead, we find nothing at all. This is the heart of Bryn's challenge. The dark forest asks us to believe two things at once. It asks us to believe the galaxy is crowded with civilizations. It also asks us to believe that not one of them ever slips. Not one broadcasts by accident. Not one decides that fear is a prison. Not one grows strong enough to speak without dying. Human history alone is a catalogue of secrets that could not be kept. To imagine a galaxy of perfect discipline is to imagine something stranger than aliens. Others have joined the argument from the side of biology. Seth Shostak is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute. He has spent a career listening for signals that never arrive. He does not dismiss the dark forest outright. He grants it a real foothold in nature. It cannot be denied, he has said, that there is some survival value in being aggressive. On Earth, caution and violence have both paid their way. A creature that strikes first sometimes outlives one that waits. That instinct is not madness. It is written into the long record of life on this planet. But Shostak's admission is narrow. Survival value is not the same as certainty. Aggression helps in some settings and ruins others. Cooperation also carries survival value, and often far more of it. The species now building radio telescopes did not conquer its way to the stars alone. It traded. It shared. It pooled knowledge across generations and continents. A galaxy of pure hunters is only one reading of the evidence. The other reading sits inside every alliance we have ever made. Other scientists have been blunter still. The astrophysicist Moya MacTair and the astrobiologist Ian Crawford of Birkbeck University of London have pressed the same complaint. They say the dark forest leans on anthropocentric assumptions. It takes human fear and human competition and paints them across the whole cosmos. It assumes that alien minds must want what we want. It assumes that they must reason the way we reason. Crawford has described the theory's genocidal hunter as a nightmare scenario rather than a proven mechanism. It is a story we tell ourselves in the dark. It is not a law we have measured. That word, anthropocentric, is the quiet center of the entire dispute. The dark forest feels rigorous because it borrows the language of strategy. It speaks of axioms and equilibria and rational actors. But its actors are suspiciously familiar. They fear like us. They expand like us. They calculate like us. Strip away the certainty, and the theory becomes a mirror. It shows a cosmos shaped in our own anxious image. Perhaps that image is accurate, perhaps it is only a reflection. There is a second place where the theory can be tested against its own foundations. Recall the two axioms. The first says survival is every civilization's primary need. The second says civilizations keep growing, while the total matter in the universe stays fixed. From those two claims, the competition follows. Scarcity forces the hunt, but both axioms can be questioned without denying any physics. A civilization able to cross between stars may not grow the way we picture growth. It may stabilize, it may turn inward, it may discover that information, not raw matter, is the resource it truly craves. The chain of suspicion faces the same scrutiny. It says two civilizations can never trust across the gulf. The distances are too vast. The lag is too long. True intentions cannot be confirmed. This is powerful, and it is not wrong on its face. But it assumes that every mind treats uncertainty as a threat. Some minds might treat it as a question instead. Uncertainty can invite caution, and caution can look like patience rather than a raised weapon. The dark forest reads every silence as a held breath before a kill. It could just as easily be a held breath before a greeting. None of this proves the dark forest false. That is the crucial point, and the careful voices insist upon it. Brin did not claim to bury the theory. He claimed only that it is one hypothesis among many, and far from the strongest. Shostak did not endorse it, he merely refused to laugh it off. McTeer and Crawford did not replace it with a cheerful cosmos. They asked for humility about how alien an alien might truly be. The result is not comfort, the result is uncertainty, honestly held. And uncertainty, in this field, is the most defensible position of all. We have one example of life. We have one example of intelligence. We have one example of a civilization that builds telescopes and asks where everyone is. From a single case, no confident law can be drawn. The dark forest builds a galaxy of hunters from that lone example. The gentler theories build a galaxy of neighbors from the very same data. Both are extrapolations. Both reach far beyond what the evidence can carry. So the debate does not resolve, it sharpens. Each side agrees on the observation. The sky is quiet. Each side disagrees on what the quiet means. To one camp, the quiet is a warning, and every silent star is a predator holding still. To the other, the quiet is merely a gap in our reach, a limit of our instruments and our years. The measurement is shared, only the interpretation divides them. And interpretation, unlike measurement, cannot be settled by listening harder. That leaves a harder question waiting underneath. If we cannot know which reading is right, how should we act? The dark forest gives a chilling piece of advice. It says the safest move is to stay hidden. It says we should not answer, and perhaps should never have spoken at all. Brin's objection gives the opposite counsel. It says a galaxy that punishes every voice should already be a graveyard, and it is not. Between those two instructions lies the most consequential choice our spaces may ever weigh. Whether to reach out, or to fall silent, when we do not know which choice is the fatal one. The scientists who have studied this longest do not pretend the answer is obvious. They separate what is measured from what is imagined. The silence is measured, the hunters are imagined, the distances are measured, the chain of suspicion is imagined. This discipline matters, because fear is persuasive in a way that evidence is not. A frightening story can feel like knowledge long before it has earned the name. The task is to hold the dread and the doubt in the same hand, and to let neither one decide for the other. And so the argument circles back toward the plainest form of the puzzle. Not whether the forest is dark, but whether we were ever right to expect the sky to be loud. The dark forest is a spectacular answer to that expectation. Yet an answer is only as sound as the expectation beneath it. Before we accept the hunters, it is worth returning to the number that promised us company in the first place. It is worth asking, once more, exactly how loud the universe was ever supposed to be. The promise of loudness came from a single line of arithmetic. Frank Drake wrote it on a blackboard in 1961. 7 factors, set side by side, waiting to be multiplied. It looked less like a prophecy and more like a grocery list. Yet inside that list lived every hope of company in the dark. The equation did not predict a crowded galaxy. It only showed how a crowded galaxy might arise. Each factor was a door. Behind each door was a smaller number, and behind that, a smaller one still. To reach a talking civilization, you pass through all of them in turn. Consider what the chain actually asks. It begins with the rate at which suitable stars are born. It narrows to the stars that hold planets. It narrows again to planets where life could take hold. Then to worlds where life actually begins. Then to life that grows complex enough to think. Then to thinkers who build machines that reach across space. Then, at the very end, to how long such a voice keeps speaking before it falls silent. Multiply 7 guesses together, and you do not get certainty. You get the shape of your own hope, or your own dread. This is the quiet honesty of the Drake equation. It was never a machine for producing answers. It was a machine for organizing a conversation. The roughly dozen minds gathered at Green Bank knew this. They were not solving the sky. They were learning how to argue about it responsibly. Carl Sagan sat in that room. So did the biologist Joshua Lederberg and the physicist Philip Morrison. They understood that most of the factors were, at that moment, pure conjecture. The equation gave their conjecture a skeleton. It turned a feeling into a structure. And here is why the structure matters to everything that follows. If you fill the equation with generous numbers, the galaxy should be humming with signals. If you fill it with cautious numbers, the galaxy could hold exactly one voice, and that voice could be ours. The silence we measure does not tell us which set of numbers is true. It only tells us that some factor, somewhere along the chain, is far smaller than optimism wants. That is the whole quarrel in a sentence. The expectation of noise was always a choice about the numbers. The universe never agreed to be loud. We assumed it, then went looking for confirmation. So the dark forest is not the only way to explain the quiet. It is one answer to a question we may have asked too confidently. Perhaps no hunter waits in the trees. Perhaps the trees are simply far emptier than we guessed. The difference between those two pictures is enormous. In one, silence is a strategy chosen by the frightened. In the other, silence is just the natural sound of a rare thing. And a rare thing needs no conspiracy to stay hidden. It only needs to be rare. This returns us, inevitably, to the filter. The great sieve that stands somewhere between dead matter and a galaxy full of minds. Robin Hanson laid out that path as a ladder of 9 steps. Each rung is a transition that life must complete to climb higher. The right star with the right ingredients. The first molecules that copy themselves. The first simple cell. Then the harder leap to a complex cell. Then sexual reproduction. Then bodies made of many cells. Then animals clever enough to use tools. Then a civilization able to reach for the stars. Then, at last, the explosion outward across the galaxy. The unsettling question is not whether the ladder exists. It is where the broken rung lies. If the improbable step is behind us, then we are the survivors of a lottery already won. If the improbable step is ahead, then a wall waits for every civilization, and we have not yet reached it. The silence is consistent with both. That is what makes it such a patient kind of terror. It refuses to say whether the worst is over or still coming. Yet there is a candidate rung that offers genuine comfort. It sits early on the ladder, at the 4th step. It is the leap from the simple cell to the complex cell. On Earth, the simple cells appeared quickly, in geological terms, once conditions allowed. But the complex cell, the kind with an inner architecture and a walled nucleus, took an astonishingly long time to arrive. The astrophysicist Matt O'Dowd has pointed to exactly this step as a leading place to hope. If that transition is the great improbability, then the filter is safely in our past. We climbed through it long ago, without knowing we were being tested. Think about what that would mean. It would mean the hard part of existence was not building rockets or radios. It was building the cell that eventually made rockets possible. The bottleneck would be microscopic and ancient, buried billions of years deep. Every organism you have ever seen would be a descendant of one improbable success. And the reason the galaxy is quiet would be almost tender. Life is common. Simple life may be everywhere. But the leap to complexity is the coin that rarely lands right. Most worlds, on this view, are covered in slime that never learnt to dream. This is the version of the filter that lets you sleep. It is not proven. Nothing here is proven. But it is a real scientific proposal, held by serious people, and it deserves to stand beside the darker readings. The dark forest asks you to fear what is out there. The behind us filter asks you to marvel at what is already within you. Both are attempts to explain the same measured silence. Only one of them requires monsters. Still, honesty forbids us from choosing comfort simply because it comforts. The filter could be early. It could also be late. It could sit at the final rung, the one no civilization has yet been shown to cross. That rung is the survival of a technological species over long stretches of time. We have held the power to end ourselves for less than a single human lifetime. We do not yet know whether that power tends toward wisdom or toward ruin. If the wall is there, at the top of the ladder, then the silence is a graveyard, and every dead voice climbed as high as we have before it stopped. Notice how the frameworks begin to fold into one another. The dark forest and the great filter are not truly separate stories. They are two descriptions of the same possible ending. In one, the ending is delivered by an enemy. In the other, the ending is delivered by circumstance, or by the civilization's own hand. A hunter in the trees and a wall at the summit produce the same observation, an empty sky. This is the frustration at the center of the paradox. Many different causes leave the same fingerprint. The silence is loud with meaning and stubbornly refuses to name its author, and so the value of the Drake equation reveals itself again, not as a calculator but as a discipline. It forces the argument to be specific. It asks, for any story you tell about the silence, which factor are you actually adjusting? Are you making thinking minds rare? Are you making their lifetimes short? Are you making their voices quiet by choice? Each hypothesis is really a claim about one term in that old chain from the blackboard. The dark forest shortens the lifetime of any civilization foolish enough to shout. The behind us filter shrinks the number of worlds that ever reach complexity at all. The equation does not settle the dispute. It simply insists that every fear be assigned an address. There is something almost humbling in that. A handful of scientists in 1961 built a tool honest enough to hold the most frightening ideas we have since invented. They did not know about dark forests. The novels that named the hunters were decades away, yet their 7 factors were already wide enough to contain them. Every solution proposed since fits somewhere inside that original frame. The equation was not a guess about aliens. It was a map of everything we did not yet understand about ourselves and our future. Which brings the question back to its plainest form, stripped of hunters and walls. Why is the sky silent? The most disciplined answer is not a single cause. It is a warning against confidence. We expected noise because we assumed our own existence was ordinary, but nothing we have measured confirms that assumption. We are one example. A sample of one cannot tell you whether you are common or unique. The silence may simply be the universe declining to flatter us. It has not told us we are alone. It has only refused to tell us we are not. This is where the careful thinker pauses, not to despair, and not to hope, but to hold the equation and the silence together. The equation says company is possible. The silence says company is unproven. Between those two statements lies the entire field of the search. Every telescope pointed outward, every catalogue of distant worlds, every attempt to listen for a signal, is an effort to move one factor from guess to measurement. Slowly, the first doors on that chain are opening. We are beginning to count the planets. We are beginning to weigh which of them could hold water and warmth. But the doors near the end remain shut. We cannot yet measure how often life begins. We cannot measure how often it thinks. We certainly cannot measure how long a thinking species survives its own inventions. Those factors are still written in the language of hope. And until they are measured, the paradox will keep its power. The dark forest will keep whispering. The filter will keep waiting, its location unknown. The silence will keep meaning too many things at once. That is the true unsettling core of the matter, deeper than any single hypothesis. Not that the universe is dangerous, but that it is quiet in exactly the way both salvation and doom would sound. The dark forest is only one way to read that quiet. It is the coldest reading. But it is not the only one that scientists have written down. Over the decades, others have looked at the same emptiness and imagined different shapes moving inside it. Some of those shapes are gentler, some are worse. To understand why the dark forest unsettles us, it helps to stand it beside its rivals. Consider first a nightmare built from machines. It begins in fiction, in the stories of the writer Fred Saberhagen. He imagined automated killing engines drifting between the stars. The astrophysicist David Brin gave the idea a firmer shape in a review he published in 1983. The machines are called berserkers, and their logic is simple enough to be terrifying. Imagine a probe that can build a copy of itself. It arrives at a star system carrying almost nothing. It mines the planets for metal. It drinks the light of the sun for power. From that energy and material, it assembles a second probe identical to the first. Then, 2 become 4. 4 become 8. The fleet grows without a factory and without a home. This is the idea of a self-replicating machine, sometimes called a von Neumann probe. Now give that machine a single instruction: find intelligent life. Destroy it before it can grow dangerous. A civilization that feared its neighbors might build such a thing and release it. It would never have to fight a war itself. Its machines would do the hunting across millions of years. And here is the darkest part of the idea. The builders could vanish entirely, and the machines would continue. A single lineage of berserkers, still obeying an ancient order, could in principle sweep a whole galaxy clean of thought. One design, gone rogue, patient and deathless, would be enough. That is the berserker hypothesis. It answers the silence with a grim economy. The sky is quiet because something makes it quiet, and keeps making it quiet, forever. Set beside the dark forest, the berserker idea shares a spine. Both say the danger is real. Both say that being noticed is being marked. But the berserker removes even the hunter's mind. It replaces the armed civilization with a blind reflex, a trap that never tires. If it is true, then silence is not a choice at all. It is a scar. Not every proposed answer carries a weapon. Some are stranger, and quieter still. In 1973, an astrophysicist named John Ball offered a very different picture. Ball worked at the Haystack Observatory, run by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He published his idea in the journal Icarus. He asked us to consider that the aliens are already here in a sense, and simply choosing not to knock. His proposal is called the zoo hypothesis. It imagines that one or more advanced civilizations already know about Earth. They could reach us if they wished. They have the power to send a signal or a ship. But they hold back on purpose. They treat our world the way we might treat a wilderness set aside for protection. They watch. They do not interfere. In this reading, the silence is not menace and it is not accident. It is manners. It is a policy of restraint, maintained by minds far older than ours. We hear nothing because nothing is meant to be heard. The forest is not dark because it hides predators. It is dark because someone has decided to leave one small clearing alone. The zoo hypothesis is almost comforting until you sit with it. It grants us safety. but it charges us our importance in return. It says we are being handled. It says the great conversation of the galaxy is already underway, and that we have not been invited, because we are not yet judged ready. That too is a kind of unease. It is softer than the dark forest, but it is real. There is one more answer worth holding up to the light. It may be the strangest of them all, and it turns the whole problem on its head. In 2017, 3 researchers filed a paper with the online archive where scientists share early work. Their names were Anders Sandberg, Stuart Armstrong, and Milan Cirkovic. They submitted it on the 27th of April. The title borrowed an old line of horror, "That is not dead which can eternal lie." The work later appeared in the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society. They called their idea the estivation hypothesis. Estivation is a word borrowed from biology. It describes creatures that sleep through heat and wait for a better season. The paper asks a bold question. What if advanced civilizations are doing the same thing, on the scale of the entire universe? The argument rests on the physics of computation. A civilization far beyond us might live as pure thought. It might exist as vast amounts of information being processed, and processing information generates waste heat. There is a principle in physics, named after the scientist Rolf Landauer, that ties the cost of a calculation to temperature. In a hot environment, each computation is expensive. In a cold environment, that same computation costs far less. Here is the crucial fact. The universe is slowly cooling as it expands. It will be far colder in the deep future than it is today. And according to the paper, computation in that cold future could be staggeringly cheaper than computation now. Not twice as cheap, not 1,000 times, roughly 1,000 billion times more efficient, by their estimate. Follow that number to its conclusion. Suppose you are a civilization made of thought. Suppose thinking will one day be that much cheaper. Why think now? Why spend your resources at today's terrible exchange rate? The rational move might be to save everything. Gather your matter, guard it, wait. Fall into a deliberate sleep and set an alarm for an age when the cosmos itself becomes a better machine for thinking. That is the estivation hypothesis. The great civilizations are not gone. They are not hunting. They are resting. The silence is the silence of a sleeper who has chosen the future over the present. And they will wake, the paper suggests, only when the universe is ready to reward them for waking. It is a remarkable inversion. The dark forest says the silence is fear. The berserker says the silence is a machine. The zoo says the silence is restraint. The estivation hypothesis says the silence is patience. Same empty sky. 4 very different reasons hiding behind it. Notice what all of them share. Every one of these answers takes the absence of a signal and fills it with intention. Each insists the quiet is meaningful, not merely empty. And that is exactly what makes the paradox so durable. The evidence is a lack of evidence. And a lack of evidence can be dressed in almost any story we are brave enough, or frightened enough to tell. It is worth saying plainly what these ideas are, and what they are not. None of them is a measurement. None rests on a captured signal or a photographed craft. They are frameworks. They are careful attempts to reason about a thing we have never once observed. The berserker, the zoo, the sleeping civilization. Each is a hypothesis in the honest sense. Each is a story disciplined by logic, still waiting for a single fact to confirm it or destroy it. That distinction matters more than it seems. It is easy to let a well-built idea start to feel like a discovery. The dark forest, in particular, has a way of sounding proven. Its logic is tight. Its 2 axioms seem reasonable. Its conclusion follows with the grip of a trap closing. But a clean argument is not the same as a true one. And this is where the story turns. Because not every scientist who studied the silence agreed that it must be sinister. Long before the dark forest had its name, one researcher tried to gather every explanation into a single place. It was that same astrophysicist and novelist, David Brin. In 1983, he published a long review article in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. In it, he set out to catalogue the possible reasons for what he called the Great Silence. He did not find one answer. He found roughly 70 of them. 70 distinct explanations for why the sky says nothing back. It remains one of the only scholarly surveys of its kind, a single map laid across the whole question at once. And Brin did not treat all 70 as equal partners. He looked hard at the darkest ones, the berserkers and their kin, and he found a crack running through their logic. His objection is sharp, and it strikes at the dark forest just as firmly as it strikes at the machines. A theory of universal silence, he argued, requires the silence to be truly universal. Every civilization, everywhere across all of time, must choose to hide, or it must be destroyed for failing to hide. That is an enormous demand to place on the entire galaxy. And Brin understood how fragile such a demand really is. For a rule to hold across the stars, it cannot bend even once. The dark forest asks us to believe that no one ever breaks the silence and lives. Not a single species, in billions of years, across billions of worlds, ever calls out and survives the call. That is the hidden weight the theory has to carry. And Brin suspected the weight was too heavy to bear. Consider what a single exception would do to the whole idea. Imagine one world that breaks the silence. It sends a clear signal into the dark. And it is not destroyed. It goes on speaking, year after year, and it survives. The moment that happens, the theory stops being a law. It becomes only a habit. Some follow it, others ignore it and live. And a habit cannot explain a silence this total. That was the pressure point Brin returned to again and again. He was not denying that some civilizations might hide. He was denying that all of them must. The dark forest does not ask for caution. It asks for perfection. Every species, without a single failure, forever. Brin had put the same insight into words years earlier, while studying the killer machines rather than the forest. He wrote that such a strategy need only happen once for the results to become the equilibrium condition in the galaxy. He meant it first as a warning. One lineage of hunting probes, one aggressive founder, could set the tone for everything that followed. But the sentence turns cleanly in the other direction. If one event can lock the galaxy into silence, then one contrary event can unlock it. A single voice that calls out and lives would rewrite the rule for everyone watching. And in a galaxy of billions of stars and billions of years, the odds against even one such exception seem thin. There is a quiet assumption buried inside the dark forest, and Brin dragged it into the light. The theory needs an enforcer. Someone must be listening. Someone must be ready and able to strike. And that listener must never miss. A single unanswered signal, a single survivor, and the spell is broken. So the theory does not only require universal fear, it requires universal competence in fear. Every hidden hunter must catch every careless voice. That is a heavier demand than the metaphor first suggests. The forest is not simply dark, it is patrolled without gaps, across distances so vast that a strike and its target may be separated by centuries. The defenders of the idea have an answer, and it is not a weak one. They return to the chain of suspicion. They return to the technology explosion. A civilization does not attack because it is cruel, they say. It attacks because it cannot afford to be wrong. It cannot read the intentions of a stranger across the light years. It cannot know how fast that stranger is growing. A neighbor that seems harmless today might leap past it before any message can cross the gulf between them. So the safest move is to stay silent and unseen. And if you cannot stay unseen, the safest move is to strike first. In that reading, even the rare civilization that survives contact does not disprove the fear. It only got lucky. And luck is not a strategy anyone can plan around. So the argument does not resolve into a clean victory. It settles into a standoff. On one side stands a cold internal logic that feels airtight once you accept its two starting rules. On the other stands the sheer difficulty of enforcing that logic across an entire galaxy without one crack. The dark forest is easy to state and hard to escape from within its own assumptions. But those assumptions are exactly where its critics have chosen to fight. And here the debate leaves the pages of fiction and enters the working world of scientists. Not everyone in that world dismisses the idea. Seth Shostak is a senior astronomer at the SETI Institute, an organization built entirely around the hope of hearing someone out there. Even he grants the theory a hearing. It cannot be denied, he has said, that there is some survival value in being aggressive. It is a careful sentence. He is not endorsing a galaxy of killers. He is admitting that a tendency to strike first is not absurd. Aggression, on Earth at least, has sometimes kept a species alive. If life elsewhere passed through anything like the same pressures, then a wary and defensive instinct might be common rather than rare. The dark forest borrows its power from that simple, uncomfortable possibility, but other scientists push back hard, and they push back at the foundations. The astrophysicist Moya McTeer and the astrobiologist Ian Crawford, who works at Birkbeck in the University of London, both point to the same flaw. The theory, they argue, rests on anthropocentric assumptions. It takes the fears and habits of one species on one planet and stretches them across the cosmos. It assumes that every mind everywhere will reason the way a frightened human might. Crawford in particular treats the theory as a nightmare scenario rather than a proven mechanism. It is a story that could be true. It is not a fact that has been shown. And the difference between those two things is the whole of science. That criticism cuts to something the metaphor hides. When Ye Wenji speaks of civilizations as armed hunters, she is describing behavior. She is not describing biology, or chemistry, or any measured law of nature. The two axioms of cosmic sociology are elegant, but they are assertions. Survival is the first need of every civilization. Endless growth against a fixed supply of matter. These sound like physics. They are closer to guesses about psychology. And a guess about the psychology of a mind we have never met is a fragile thing to build a galaxy upon. The critics are not saying the fear is impossible. They are saying we have mistaken a fear for a finding. This is the deepest tension in the whole question. The dark forest is compelling precisely because it feels familiar. It reads history back into the stars. It takes the long human record of rival powers, of first strikes and arms races, and it projects that record onto every world that might exist. That projection is what makes the theory land like a cold weight in the chest. But it is also the reason to distrust it. Familiarity is not evidence. The universe is under no obligation to think like us. A pattern that governed empires on one small planet may govern nothing at all beyond it. And so the same feature that makes the dark forest persuasive is the feature that makes careful scientists refuse to accept it. Notice too what the theory quietly ignores. It assumes that the safest response to a stranger is always violence. It does not weigh the cost of being wrong in the other direction. To strike first is to reveal yourself. The weapon that destroys a distant world also announces the existence of the one who fired it. In a galaxy supposedly ruled by hidden hunters, the act of hunting is itself a signal. It draws the attention of anyone else watching the dark. The perfectly rational killer, in trying to stay safe, may light a beacon over its own position. The logic that demands silence may also forbid the very strike that silence is meant to enable. The dark forest, taken to its end, can turn against itself. None of this settles the matter, and that is the honest state of the science. The critics have not proven the galaxy is friendly. Shostak has not proven it is deadly. What the debate has produced is a sharper sense of what the theory is and what it is not. It is a hypothesis. It is one explanation among the roughly 70 that Brin once gathered into a single paper. It is not a measurement. No instrument has detected a hidden hunter. No survey has found the wreckage of a silenced world. The dark forest lives entirely in the realm of reasoning. And reasoning, however tight, is not the same as looking through a telescope and seeing. and yet the reasoning refuses to leave us alone, because the silence it tries to explain is real. That is the part no critic can wave away. The stars are still quiet. The equation on the greenbank blackboard still suggests we should have company. The great ladder of the filter still stands with its dangerous rungs unmarked. Whether or not the forest is dark, the sky above us has not spoken. So the question does not close, it only deepens. If the dark forest is wrong, then some other answer must carry the weight of that silence, and every other answer we have met so far has carried a shadow of its own. There is one more idea to place beside the hunters and the machines and the watchful keepers of the zoo. It does not ask us to imagine a galaxy of killers. It asks us to imagine a galaxy that is simply waiting, not hiding in fear, not stalking through the trees, resting, holding still for reasons that have nothing to do with us, and everything to do with the deep future of the universe itself. It is the strangest of the serious proposals, and in a quiet way it is the gentlest. To reach it, we have to stop thinking about who might be dangerous, and start thinking about when it makes sense to act at all. Consider first why a mind might choose to do nothing, not from weakness, not from surrender, from arithmetic. Every action costs energy, and every unit of energy spent now is a unit that cannot be spent later. A civilization that thinks in millions of years does not measure cost the way we do. It asks a different question. It asks not only whether a thing can be done, but whether this is the right moment in the history of the universe to do it. And the answer, for some tasks, may be no. Not yet. Wait, this is the seed of the estivation hypothesis. The name borrows a word from biology. Estivation is dormancy through heat. Certain animals bury themselves and slow their bodies almost to stillness to survive a hot, dry season. It is the summer mirror of winter hibernation. The animal is not dead. It is not fleeing. It is holding, deliberately, until the conditions that punish activity have passed. The proposal asks whether an advanced civilization might do the same, not for a season, but for an age of the cosmos. The idea was set down in a paper submitted in April of the year 2017. Its authors were Anders Sandberg, Stuart Armstrong, and Milan Cirkovic. They gave it a title drawn from an old and eerie line of verse: "That is not dead which can eternal lie." The work appeared in the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society, and its argument turns the silence of the sky into something almost restful. The great powers of the galaxy may be present. They may be everywhere. They are simply asleep, and they have very good reasons to sleep. To understand those reasons, we have to think about what such a civilization would want. Suppose it no longer needs planets to walk on, or air to breathe. Suppose its ambitions have moved inward, into thought, into computation, into vast simulated worlds and calculations we could not begin to describe. For a mind like that, the resource that matters is not land. It is the ability to process information. And here the argument leans on a quiet piece of physics known as Landauer's principle. Landauer's principle links information to heat. Erasing a single piece of information, resetting one bit, cannot be done for free. It carries a minimum energy cost. And that minimum cost is not fixed. It depends on temperature. The colder the surroundings, the less energy each erasure demands. Computation, in other words, is cheaper in the cold. A processor running in a frigid environment can do far more thinking for the same store of fuel than one running warm. For us, the difference is small and hard to notice. For a civilization that has turned itself into a machine for thought, the difference is everything. Now recall where the universe is going. It is expanding, and as it expands it cools. The background glow left over from its birth grows fainter and colder with every passing eon. The present cosmos from this vantage is still warm. It is still, in a sense, an inefficient place to compute. But the far future will be different. The far future will be cold beyond anything we can feel. And in that deep cold, according to the authors, the same store of energy could accomplish a staggering amount more work. Their estimate is not modest. Computation in that distant frozen era could become up to 10 to the 30th power times more efficient than computation attempted today. Let that number rest for a moment, spelled out in full. 10 followed by 30 zeros. It is a factor so large that ordinary comparison fails. If a task would take a warm civilization the entire present age of the universe to complete, a cold civilization could complete the same task, and countless others beside it, using the same fuel in the far future. The energy you burn thinking now is almost wasted. The energy you save and spend later buys you a near infinity of thought. For a patient mind, the choice is obvious. Do not think now. Bank everything. Wait for the cold. So the estivating civilizations in this picture have gathered their resources and gone dormant. They are not extinct. They are not hiding from hunters. They have made a calm economic decision about the timing of their own future. They have looked at the whole span of cosmic history and concluded that the greatest era of their existence lies ahead, in an age so distant that the stars themselves will have mostly burned out, and so they wait for it. They sleep through the warm, loud, wasteful present, which to them is little more than an inconvenient dawn. This reframes the silence completely. We have spent this journey imagining reasons the sky is quiet that fill us with unease, a filter that may still lie ahead of us, hunters who fire on any light they see, machines that patrol for the crime of arising, keepers who watch us the way we watch animals behind glass. The estivation idea offers something different. The sky is quiet because the great civilizations are resting, and a resting civilization has no reason to broadcast, no reason to build, no reason to announce itself across the stars. It is conserving. Every signal, every expansion, every visible act would be energy poured out for nothing during the one era when energy is least valuable. There is a gentleness to this that the other answers lack. The dark forest asks us to believe the universe is governed by fear. The estivation hypothesis asks us to believe it is governed by patience. In one, silence is a weapon held ready. In the other, silence is simply the sound of a mind that has decided the moment to act has not yet come. Both explain the same empty sky, but they ask us to imagine very different neighbors. One imagines killers, the other imagines sleepers who mean us no harm at all, because they are barely aware that a warm and hasty little world has begun to listen for them. And yet even this quiet idea carries its own strangeness, and its own unresolved questions. If mighty civilizations are truly dormant across the galaxy, then their resources are not idle. Their gathered matter and stored energy would have to be guarded, protected, kept from decay across timescales that dwarf the lifetime of a star. Something would have to tend the sleeping order while the sleepers themselves lie still. And that raises a difficulty. A universe full of dormant powers, each sitting on vast hoards for the far future, is a universe in which the present is not truly empty. It is a universe in which the great estates are simply locked, their owners away, their lights switched off to save the bill. Whether such an arrangement could hold across billions of years without a single member breaking ranks to seize an advantage now is exactly the kind of question the theory leaves open. It is worth pausing on how far we have travelled to arrive here. We began with a blunt question asked over lunch, a physicist wondering aloud where everybody is. We watched that question sharpen into a paradox, then into a whole field of proposed answers. We counted the stars and found them beyond counting. We wrote an equation to organize our ignorance and discovered how little of it we could fill. We met a filter that might lie behind us as relief, or ahead of us as sentence. We entered a forest where the safest civilization is the silent one, and the first to speak is the first to die. We considered machines that hunt and keepers who abstain. And now we arrive at sleepers who have looked at the same silence and read in it nothing but good sense. What unites all of these ideas is not their content. Their content could hardly be more opposed. What unites them is that each takes the same single piece of evidence, the quiet of the sky, and builds from it an entire architecture of meaning. The forest and the sleepers cannot both be right. The filter behind us and the filter ahead of us cannot both be true. The zoo and the berserker describe civilizations with utterly different souls, and still every one of them fits the data we have, because the data we have is almost nothing. One negative observation, an absence of signals, a stillness that any story can claim. That is the uncomfortable heart of the whole subject. We are not choosing between theories by weighing evidence for and against them. We are choosing between them by asking which one we can bear to believe, and that is not science. Science needs a way to be wrong. It needs a measurement that could come back and say, no, this picture is mistaken, try again. The silence, on its own, cannot do that. It sits there, patient as an estivating mind, and lets each of us pour our fears or our hopes into it. So the question that David Brin asked, and the question the Dark Forest tried to answer, and the question the sleepers try to dissolve, all fold back into a single unfinished problem. Not one of these ideas has been ruled out. Not one of them has been confirmed. Each remains a possibility standing in a row of possibilities, and the sky above us continues to withhold the one thing that would let us tell them apart. To move past guessing, we would need the silence itself to break, or we would need to understand far better than we do why a universe so vast should be so restrained. And that returns us, after everything, to the very place where this began. The four men were walking to lunch. The year was 1950. They had been trading jokes about a cartoon in a magazine. The drawing blamed missing city trash cans on flying saucers. Enrico Fermi walked with Emil Konopinski, Edward Teller, and Herbert York. Their talk had wandered toward whether a machine could ever cross between the stars. Then, Fermi asked it plainly, "Where is everybody?" Teller remembered the laughter that followed. It came, he said, because everyone understood at once. No one asked Fermi what he meant. They all knew he meant the silence of the sky. That is the thread. Every idea in this long account is one answer to that single lunchroom question. Fermi never published it himself. Carl Sagan set the thought in print first. It sat inside a footnote in 1963. The name we use arrived later still. A paper in 1977 fixed the words Fermi paradox to the problem. It leaned on an argument made 2 years before about the plain absence of visitors on Earth. So the paradox took Fermi's name long after the meal was over. The question outlived the walk that produced it, and it is never stopped asking. 11 years after that lunch, Frank Drake tried to give the silence a shape. He gathered about a dozen people at Green Bank in West Virginia. The meeting fell on the first day of November in 1961. He wrote 7 factors on the blackboard. Each factor was one link in a chain that runs from stars to signals. Carl Sagan sat in that room. So did Joshua Lederberg and Philip Morrison. Melvin Calvin took a phone call during the meeting. It told him he had won the Nobel Prize. Drake's equation did not answer Fermi. It did something quieter and more lasting. It organized the ignorance. It showed exactly which unknowns stand between us and a true count of our neighbors. Then, Robin Hanson pressed on the darkest of those unknowns. His essay appeared online in 1996. He revised it 2 years later. He asked whether we are almost past the great filter. He laid out 9 steps from dead matter to a civilization that can fill a galaxy. Somewhere on that ladder, he argued, sits a barrier that almost nothing crosses. The empty sky is his only evidence. It is also enough. If the barrier lies behind us, we are rare survivors of a test already passed. If it lies ahead, our silence is a warning we have not yet learned to read. That one uncertainty is why the great filter unsettles careful people. It offers no comfort in either direction. It only moves the danger. The Dark Forest offers the coldest answer of them all. It borrows its name from a novel Liu Cixin, published in 2008. The English translation reached readers through Tor Books in August of 2015. Inside the story, a character named Ye Wenji states 2 axioms. Survival is the first need of any civilization, and every civilization keeps growing, while the total matter of the universe stays fixed. From those two plain lines, the rest follows without mercy. Two strangers across the stars cannot read each other's true intentions. That is the chain of suspicion. And a neighbor weaker than you today might leap past you before your messages even arrive. That is the technology explosion. Put the two together, and the safe move becomes terrible. Stay hidden, or strike first. Liu Cixin's own image says it more clearly than any argument. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is an armed hunter, moving quietly between the trees like a ghost. The berserker idea reaches the same grave through a different door. Fred Saberhagen imagined the machines in fiction. David Brin gave them a formal place in the debate in 1983. These are self-replicating probes. They mine stars and worlds to build fresh copies of themselves. Their task is to find young intelligence and end it before it grows dangerous. One such lineage, once loosed, could in principle sweep a whole galaxy clean. In that picture, the silence is not caution at all. It is the quiet that settles after a culling. The zoo hypothesis keeps us alive, but alone on purpose. John Ball proposed it in 1973, while working at the Haystack Observatory. He suggested the others already know that we are here. They simply choose not to speak. Earth, in his telling, is a fenced wilderness, left undisturbed by design. The silence then is neither danger nor absence. It is a policy of non-interference, held steady across the years. And the estivation hypothesis turns the whole fear inside out. Anders Sandberg, Stuart Armstrong, and Milan Cirkovic submitted it in April of 2017. Their title borrowed an old line about that which can eternal lie. Their argument rests on physics, not on menace. Computing runs cheaper in the cold, and the universe grows colder as it ages. By one estimate, a patient mind could one day think far more efficiently than it can now. The gain runs to something near 10 to the 30th power. So perhaps the great civilizations are not gone, and not hunting. Perhaps they are asleep, holding their power in reserve. They may be waiting for a colder dawn, when every thought will cost almost nothing. Against the coldest reading stands David Brin's steady objection. His 1983 paper appeared in the Quarterly Journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. It ran across pages 283 to 309. It gathered roughly 70 explanations for the Great Silence. It remains a rare full survey of the whole question. His challenge to the dark forest is simple and hard to dodge. The strategy needs almost everyone to obey it, forever, and it need only fail once. If a single civilization breaks silence and survives, its example becomes the new rule of the galaxy. One loud and living exception would dissolve the claim that silence is mandatory. The theory demands a perfection that history rarely allows. Working scientists sit on both sides of that line. Seth Shostak at the SETI Institute grants the theory its one true nerve. There is, he says, some survival value in being aggressive. That much biology will allow. But Moya MacTeer and Ian Crawford answer from the other direction. They call the dark forest a chain of anthropocentric assumptions. It projects a human kind of fear onto minds we have never met. They name it a nightmare scenario, not a proven law of nature. And Matt O'Dowd has pointed to a gentler possibility, hidden inside Hanson's own ladder. The jump from simple cells to complex ones, the fourth of the 9 steps, may be the rare barrier. If that is true, the hardest test lies behind us. It is not waiting somewhere in our future. Notice what all of these answers share. Each one takes the same empty sky and reads a different verdict in it. The filter reads that sky as a warning about a test still ahead. The dark forest reads it as a threat that keeps every survivor quiet. The berserker reads it as a graveyard swept clean by machines. The zoo reads it as a fence around a protected wilderness. The sleepers read it as a long pause before a colder age. And Brin reads it as a puzzle that human fear has oversolved. The silence itself never says which reading is correct. It only reflects the fear or the hope that each observer brings to it. That is the deepest problem beneath every hypothesis in this account. They differ in almost everything. They point at different centuries, different dangers, different futures, yet they rest on the very same piece of evidence. One empty sky, one unanswered question, first spoken over lunch in 1950. The filter and the forest and the sleepers cannot all be right. Some of them must be wrong. But the silence gives us no way to sort them. It does not distinguish a galaxy of hunters from a galaxy of the merely rare. It does not separate a fenced wilderness from a graveyard. It reads the same in every case. And a single fact that fits every story is a fact that has not yet chosen one. So the row of possibilities still stands, unbroken. The Drake meeting organized the unknowns but did not close them. Hansen named the barrier but could not locate it. Liu Cixin drew the hunter but did not prove the forest. Ball built the fence and Sandberg built the long sleep, and neither can be seen or tested from where we stand. Brin gathered 70 answers and showed that the field is crowded, not settled. Each idea remains a candidate. Not one has been confirmed. Not one has been ruled out. And the number of stars overhead has not shrunk while we argued. It has only grown as our instruments reach farther into the dark and still return with nothing that speaks. To choose among these answers, we would need something the sky has so far refused to give. We would need the silence itself to break, even once, in a way we could measure and repeat. Or we would need a far deeper grasp of why life should be so rare, or so quiet, or so patient. Until then, the question keeps its full weight. It is the same weight it carried when 4 physicists laughed on their way to lunch. They understood at once what Fermi meant, and so, by now, do we. The sky is enormous. It should be crowded. And still, when we listen, almost nothing answers back. So the story returns to where it began. 4 physicists on a path to lunch in the year 1950. Fermi asked where everybody was. The others laughed, because they already understood the weight of it. That weight has never lifted. Every answer since has been an attempt to carry it. We can now say a few things with some confidence. The sky is vast beyond easy imagining. Billions of stars turn within our galaxy alone. The Drake equation did not tell us how many neighbors we have. It told us how little we know, and it did so honestly. It named the terms of our ignorance and left the values open. The Great Filter offered a warning rather than a comfort. Somewhere on the long climb from dead matter to a galaxy-spanning civilization, at least one step must be almost impossibly hard. If that step lies behind us, we are the fortunate survivors of a narrow passage. If it lies ahead, then our future narrows towards silence. We do not know which is true. That uncertainty is the whole of the danger. The dark forest gave the silence a colder shape. In its logic, the quiet is not absence but discipline. Survival is the first need. Resources are finite. Trust cannot cross the years and centuries between stars. A weaker civilization today might overtake you tomorrow. So the safe move is to stay hidden. The tempting move is to strike first. In that picture, the sky is not empty. It is only holding its breath. Around it stand its kindred nightmares. The Berserker hypothesis imagines machines that hunt life across the stars and need only one lineage to sterilize a galaxy. The Zoo hypothesis imagines watchers who know us and choose not to speak. The Estivation hypothesis imagines minds gone dormant on purpose, waiting for a colder and more efficient universe in which to think. Each turns the silence into a decision rather than an accident. Against all of them stands a single objection, quiet and stubborn. David Brin gathered roughly 70 explanations and showed how crowded the field of answers is. Then he pointed at the flaw in every strategy of silence. It needs everyone to obey it. It need only fail once. One civilization that breaks the quiet and survives would unravel the whole grim equilibrium. The dark forest demands a perfect and permanent obedience that history rarely grants to anything. So the honest position is not despair, and it is not comfort. It is suspension. We hold four things in separate hands: confirmed measurement, leading explanation, disputed reading, and open speculation. We do not pretend they weigh the same. The confirmed part is small. The sky is old, wide, and so far quiet. The rest is careful reasoning about a single unrepeated fact. The strongest unresolved question is also the simplest. Is the great trial behind us or ahead of us? If behind, the silence is only distance and time. Someday an instrument may catch the first true signal. If ahead, the silence may be a lesson we have not yet learnt to read. Nothing we have measured chooses between these for us. The evidence points in every direction at once. That is another way of saying it does not yet point at all. There is a strange dignity in that. We built the radio dish and the equation and the argument. We named the paradox and then named a dozen ways out of it, and still we sit beneath the same enormous sky as those four men on their walk. The same blunt question remains unanswered. The difference is only that we now know how many stars there are to have gone quiet. Maybe the silence is caution. Maybe it is patience. Maybe it is simply that life is rarer than the numbers tempt us to hope. We cannot yet tell the merciful reading from the terrible one. Both fit the evidence, which is nothing, repeated across the whole width of the heavens. For now the paradox keeps its full weight, exactly as it was handed to us. The universe is large, it should be loud, and it is not. We go on listening anyway, because listening is the one honest thing left to do, and far above the noise of our small world, the stars keep their silence, and wait for us to grow quiet enough to listen.